This podcast may contain explicit language. You're a swell dish. I think I'm going to go for you. The Public Enemy is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
Tonight, for our 308th episode, we discuss The Public Enemy from 1931, celebrating its 95th anniversary this year, directed by William Wellman, written by Harvey F. Thu, cinematography by Devereaux Jennings, music by David Mendoza, editing by Edward Michael McDermott, starring James Cagney as Tom Powers, Jean Harlow as Gwen Allen, Edward Woods as Matt Doyle, Joan Blondell as Mamie, Donald Cook as Mike Powers, Leslie Fenton as Nails Nathan, Beryl Mercer as Ma Powers, Robert O'Connor as Patty Ryan, and Murray Cannell as Putty Nose. Background for the movie: based on Beer and Blood by John Bright and Kubik Glassman, The Public Enemy opened on April 23, 1931. On a budget between $150,000 and $230,000, The Public Enemy is said to have grossed $550,000 at the time and to finish inside the top 10 of the box office for that year. The film was mostly well-received at the time, and at the 4th Academy Awards, the film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Story, losing to The Dawn Patrol. Whatever that is.
I can tell you all about it, actually.
Yeah, of course you could. It's 1931. In 1998, The Public Enemy was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. In 2003, the character of Tom Powers was among the AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains, placing 42nd in the villain list. In 2008, the film appeared on one of the AFI's 10 top 10 lists, the best 10 films in 10 classic American film genres, as it was listed as the 8th best in the gangster film genre. In 2025, The Hollywood Reporter listed The Public Enemy as having the best stunts of the years 1930 to 1931. That feels like a pitcher who is always great on Tuesdays as long as he's in a domed stadium and it's raining outside. The Public Enemy currently holds a 100% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 80 score on Metacritic, and a 3.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd. But of course, we can't do this ourselves, so we bring in our returning celebrity guest. She is the host and creator of Shea Cinema, a CLP contributor, and making her 8th appearance on the show to date, it's the sassy lass from Las Vegas. Please welcome back, Sara Shea.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Dana. Thank you so much for having me back. I feel like almost a regular guest at this point. And I'm super excited because this movie and a previous time I was on for Dracula were in the 30s, which is totally my wheelhouse after we spent all this time together in the 70s. So I'm super excited. Even if you guys aren't, I'm super excited.
So we've only spent time together discussing the 30s, 50s, and 70s. Maybe at some point we'll go to the 90s and the 2010s, but it's apparently only the odd-numbered decades. Only
the odd-numbered ones, yes. That is true.
I mean, to be fair, that's where most of the interesting movies lie, but okay.
We're going to talk about a movie in the 90s.
We are?
This summer.
Oh, that is correct. Your next time on, but we'll tease that a little later.
Yeah.
Okay, so you picked this movie. You've obviously discussed it on your own show.
Mm-hmm.
You, I believe, had told me that this was your first outside of the Best Picture nominated films that you've covered with your dad on your own show. What is your experience and relationship to this film?
Yeah, so this is actually the second bonus episode that we did, because the first one that we did was actually Dracula, because we knew that Dracula was significant enough, which I've also covered with you guys. So my relationship with this movie in particular, I saw this movie when I was a little kid. So it was definitely one of the first movies that I'm sure that we rented on VHS, but I'm pretty sure that it was also on TV as well. So I grew up knowing this movie. This wasn't my first Cagney movie. My first Cagney movie was Yankee Doodle Dandy, where he's all talking, all singing, all dancing. So this movie, it was weird for me when I saw it as a kid because I thought he was a musical star, and here he was being a bad guy, and that kind of threw me for a loop. But that was also one of my first experiences of seeing an actor play completely different characters, right? Because in this era, people are playing very much to type over and over and over again, and that was actually something that's interesting about Cagney's career, because this movie gave him this stereotype of being a gangster all of the time, but that is absolutely not what he was like in real life. And he grew up dancing and doing more like the stuff that he did in Yankee Doodle Dandy. So I've known this movie my whole life, which is a good thing or a bad thing, growing up with this sort of unadulterated violence as a child.
Now, if I recall, Dad, you had told me that you did not remember seeing this for the first time with me when I was recovering from my surgery a few years ago. So this is relatively fresh for you, basically like a first watch?
I did remember seeing it, but I just didn't remember what context it was I saw it.
So what were your thoughts, I guess, coming back to this?
You can certainly tell it was done in the early 30s. A little overacted at times. A little corny with some of the lines at times.
I mean, they were just learning to talk in movies.
Yeah. It was interesting simply because it gave a very slanted performance of a negative view of Prohibition when, in retrospect, everybody was drinking almost. How Prohibition occurred, I have no idea based on how many people were consuming and violating the law. But it was at a time when they were talking seriously about ending it. This film comes out to just kind of, we got to stave this, because it's all these gangsters that are destroying Prohibition. Because, of course, they can sell to people and force them to drink. They certainly don't, stand to make any profit if people aren't interested in it.
Fair enough. Have you seen any of Cagney's other gangster films?
I cannot think if I have, or if I have, I cannot remember them.
I think the only other one that I have caught to this point is White Heat, which is very famous in its own right. But the problem is that I've never been able to finish it because every time it was on TCM, on like the streaming service after the fact, or whatever I was using to watch it, it kept getting deleted or recorded over, or it expired or whatever else. So despite trying to watch it 3 different times, I've only made it 75% of the way through the film. Never finished it. So it's been on my list for a while. But that being said, I think Cagney is a very charismatic actor. Everything he seems to do, I enjoy him, even if I don't necessarily enjoy the movie as a whole. I think White Heat at times falls into that category. I find White Heat to be a little bit more engaging than this movie, which is much more simplistic, and the writing kind of lets it down a little bit. Like, it's not really an engaged story. The fact that it was nominated for Best Story is a little unusual in my eyes. Having seen this now, I will say, the first time that we tried to watch it a few years ago and I was recovering from surgery, I fell asleep during it that time, but it was within the context of, I was on drugs, pretty heavy drugs. It was actually kind of nice, the kind of drugs, but, we'll move on from that. And this time, I kind of wanted to fall asleep the second time through. So I ended up having to go through it a third time because I'm like, Tom, you need to make a concerted effort. You really need to try. So I watched it a third time. And it was better, but it's still early 30s. Yeah. Like, some of the acting saves the film, but...
Yeah, we were watching it together over the weekend, and I was watching the movie. I wasn't watching you falling asleep again, because I've done that enough over the years. So I didn't realize that you were nodding off.
I'm so disappointed. That's okay.
We'll have to learn to live with your disappointment.
Yeah. Disappointed.
He does this on purpose because it allows him that when he actually achieves a certain level of expectation, it shocks everyone.
Wow, where did I learn that from? just questioning, curiosity. Anyway, now you've had a criticism, Dad, before of gangster films, most notably The Godfather and Goodfellas, for its glamorization of gangster life. Would you level the same criticism here of this film?
Well, it did everything it could to try to make it look unglamorous. Everybody's getting shot at or shot up or beat up or...
But at the same time, they're in expensive clothes, they're with fast women, they're living in the best hotels and having the best food.
Fast women, huh?
Well, some men prefer that. I don't know. Not all of them could be married for nearly 40 years.
It's only 37.
That's why I said nearly. I know how to do math.
Well, the whole point of this movie is that Wellman wanted to make a movie that was over the top and pushed all of the boundaries in terms of what you could show on film. So he wanted it to be the most violent, the most upsetting, but they also... Yes?
Well, I was just thinking 95 years later, this does not seem that violent or, over-sexualized. Sure. There's some taboo stuff in here that they pulled out. There are 3 scenes specifically that got added back in after the fact, including the weird rape scene that feels like it has nothing else to do with the rest of the movie.
Right, and also not a woman being raped, but a woman raping a man, right? So also unexpected. So here's the thing. He wanted to create something that was over the top, but this movie was still limited by, even though it's pre-code and they didn't have to follow all of these rules and strictures, there were still things about this movie that were too much that they had to take out. And that is why there's the framing beforehand of this is a movie about this horrible scourge that is affecting society, like gangsters and criminality and all of that type of stuff. And then on the back end, oh God, it's so terrible. Even as the villain, who's somehow the protagonist in the movie, this is kind of like an anti-hero movie, right? Even as he gets it in the end, right? And so when they re-released it, they had to take scenes out because they were too much, and then they put them back in. So yes, by today's standards, it's tame. But thinking about what people had access to, and at the time, criminals were being glorified. They were being glorified in the media all of the time. People were following actual criminals and following their stories in newspapers. This story, for the movie, it was an original screenplay, but it was based on a book that was never published, and it was written by some newspapermen who were familiar with all of the crime stuff that was happening in Chicago. So this is something that people were obsessed with, whether it was appropriate or not, and they just wanted more and more of it. There were lots and lots of gangster movies before this one, but this is the one that made James Cagney a star, and this is the one that simultaneously managed to show this sort of... It totally glamorizes it, I think, as you say, Tom, right? They've got all of this money, and yet, as Dana says, they try really hard to show that it's an awful... Like, the consequences are pretty dire, right?
I think it's a weird point of view to use to put basically the hero of your film is the villain and
Yeah.
have it be anything less than glamorous. Because Scorsese does the same thing. If you really wanted to give a perspective of the ugliness of gangster life, you put it in the perspective of the people who are being taken advantage of or that are being killed or, you know, anybody else that's actually a victim of the crime, not the people perpetrating it. Because the people perpetrating it often, as they continue to get away with it, it feels additionally like, wow, if they can get away with that, well, you know, boy, this doesn't seem so bad.
But isn't the point, part of the point maybe, watching how a criminal evolves, right? So this movie covers Tom Powers' whole life, right? From when he's like a little kid. And so we're supposed to be seeing how this happened. I think that's what compels people, and that's why the protagonist is the criminal villain, right?
Well, I think because of that, you're trying to feel some level of empathy.
Right.
Or they're trying to inject some level of empathy, saying that this guy might be a product of his environment more than he's necessarily actively choosing to be a bad guy. But by the same token, then you're giving him a pass.
We had tons of these. I mean, this just takes a small sliver of society, which is those that capitalized on Prohibition. We had tons of criminal activity with, you can look at, in fact, Henry Ford was noted to have a hatchet man who murdered on his behest all the time. They've been able to identify, it's like within the annals of the Ford history, that this guy was, people would just show up dead that were pissing off Henry Ford. No problem there. The DuPonts, the Roosevelts made all their money selling opium in China. This stuff is going on, but the wealthy got a pass. This is just taking this sliver of poor, usually first generation, if not even that, immigrants, and saying they're the ones we're going to point to because they're capitalizing on this and making money, and it's all this violence, where it was all over the place.
So your argument is that it's capitalists reinforcing that they're the only ones who deserve the money, even with their ill-gotten gains?
What I'm saying is that in actuality, what you're talking about is that the wealthiest people and the poorest people do the same, almost the exact same things, except that people who seem to have more prestige and wealth tend to get away with it more often.
Well, on that note, do you have a plot summary ready for us?
Oh, I do. In The Public Enemy, James Cagney plays a small-time hood, Tom Powers, who rises through the ranks of organized crime during the Prohibition era. Alongside his partner, played by Ed Woods, he exploits the illegal liquor trade to amass power and wealth. As Powers becomes more violent and reckless, his success begins to unravel. His relationships with women, rivals, and especially his law-abiding brother, played by Donald Cook, grow strained.
Thank you, Dad. So what is this film about?
I think it really is that question that you've already asked. Is it nature versus nurture at its most basic? Because you have people who were raised exactly the same way and turned out completely differently, and yet the circumstances of their lives were not exactly the same, right? So are bad people or criminals, are they born? This movie would suggest, I think, that they are. That they can't even help it, right?
I'm going to borrow a line from at least the TV show Westworld. I never saw the movie. These violent delights have violent ends.
Do you know what that quote is actually originally from?
No.
It's from Romeo and Juliet, actually.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, but that is why it's being quoted in Westworld, because it is something that says to frame the story of Romeo and Juliet that it's supposed to be romance, but it's not. And so it's a great quote to use in Westworld, because yes, these violent delights do have violent ends, and it absolutely applies in this case as well.
I remember as a child, my boyhood pastor used to use an example of it in sermons periodically, and he would talk about two men who their father had been an abusive alcoholic, and the one was a teetotaler and a pillar of the community, and the other was an abusive drunk. And they asked both men why they were the way they were, and they said the same thing, which is, with a father like that, how did you expect me to turn out?
Well, I mean, you bucked the trend of your own circumstances to rise
Yes, I did.
above as a phoenix. Yet, I suppose you're the outlier because all of your cousins were kind of in the same suit, and none of them really, at least to my knowledge, at least on one side of the family more than the other one. I won't comment on the Schwartzes, but the Duncan side, none of them seem to be professionals, let alone like high degree professionals.
There are a couple of my cousins who have made something of themselves and had been doing very well. Some of them married into more prestige. A couple of them went on and got advanced degrees and such. So I can't say all of them, but
Okay.
for the most part, when my cousins all got together as pallbearers for my dad's funeral, they stood around and I joined in. We talked about which were the nicest prisons in Wisconsin. They had all been wards. I had been there visiting clients. But we could have a nice conversation.
To be fair, you do have a sibling that is a doctor in being a medium.
And pet communications.
Yes, specializing in pet communications.
Dead pet communications.
Yes. So
Woof,
if
woof.
anybody has any interest in communicating with their dead pets, certainly look up Dina's former sibling. Anyway, moving on.
I'm an only child now.
Yeah. You only used to share parents. Did you know? On the set one day, James Cagney stared at Jean Harlow's nipples and asked, likely in perfect innocence and good humor, "How do you keep those things up?" She replied, "I ice them," before trotting off to her dressing room to do just that. I don't know why you would in a 1931 film. I suppose this is the sex appeal?
Well, yeah. As I was saying before we went on the air, there are some famous photos. If you looked at those famous photos, you'd understand what I'm talking about and what she was talking about. And for that matter, what Cagney was talking about. So,
Fay Wray does the same thing in King Kong.
I guess I didn't pay attention that closely to that one, but okay.
well, Fay Wray only got that job because she was sleeping with Joseph P. Kennedy at the time, and he was the producer and the K in RKO film.
It's good to be the king.
Yes, it is.
Did you know? Edward Woods was originally hired for the lead role of Tom Powers, and James Cagney was hired to play Matt Doyle, his friend. However, once director William A. Wellman got to know both of them and saw Cagney in rehearsals, he realized that Cagney would be far more effective in the star role than Woods, so he switched them. And the rest is history.
This was Woods' high watermark as an actor.
Well, I mean, he was kind of flat in the role. I think there's a
I
reason.
know I think he ended up in production and in representation, as an agent and promoter and such. He kind of did the behind the scenes after this.
Here's the thing. He's a pretty face. That's basically what he was there to do. And then they realized they needed to have someone who could make Tom Powers even grittier because he couldn't pull it off because he was just too cute.
Yes, and he had to do something
Yeah.
otherwise because Fox News wasn't available for just pretty faces.
Did you know? Because of the infamous grapefruit scene, for years afterward, when dining in restaurants, fellow patrons would send grapefruit to James Cagney, which, almost invariably, he would happily eat.
Why not?
Some pretty big grapefruits there. Anyway, did you know? Thanks to this film, Mae Clarke was asked how did it feel to have a grapefruit shoved in your face for the rest of her life. She usually gave the same answer. Wet.
Yeah.
And so that looks like a good spot for our first break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 309th episode, we welcome back five-time club member and award-winning author V.P. Morris to discuss Gilda from 1946, celebrating its 80th anniversary, directed by Charles Vidor, I think I have the pronunciation right, written by Marion Parsonet and Ben Hecht, cinematography by Rudolph Mate, music by M.W. Stoloff and Marlon Skiles, editing by Charles Nelson, starring Rita Hayworth, Glenn Ford, George McCready, and Joseph Calleja. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's ReelGood.
That was Charles Nelson and not Charles Nelson Riley, correct?
You and I had the exact same thought, but I can't do nearly the impersonation that Will Ferrell does of Charles Nelson Riley. However,
Or, for that matter,
just
Alec Baldwin.
just for a personal anecdote, recently. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Alec Baldwin does a really great Charles Nelson Riley. That's right. It wasn't Ferrell. It was Baldwin on SNL. Anyway, one of our longtime office coworkers, Donna, was wearing these large, thick glasses in a circular fashion that you really don't see anymore. So I told her she looked like Brett Summers, and she was impressed that I knew who that was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Donna, you know who my father is, right? We used to watch regularly the 70s Match Game on repeats on Game Show Network.
Yep.
Like when I was in third grade.
Yes, they were funny.
Sure. I mean, I enjoy Match Game, to be fair. And it gets a little taboo and risque, and we certainly don't need to go into a famous office Christmas party where we played Match Game involving my mother. We'll leave that one as a tease for maybe one of these times that she's on again. But anyway, we can move forward. So, before we move any further, though, let's check in with our guest. Sarah, what is going on with you? What are you working on, and where can people find you?
Well, golly gosh, I've been editing some super old episodes of our show that I recorded with my dad over a year ago. So working on getting those out. We just released an episode from a long, long time ago, 42nd Street, working on the next ones. And then eventually, hopefully before June, we'll release the episode that you were on, Tom, when you joined us to talk about Little Women.
And I predicted, I think accurately, that that'll be coming out in June.
Shh. Okay. And then...
How is the editing going, by the way?
The editing, I haven't had a chance to do it today because we've had a rehearsal So basically, this week is rehearsal all week, and nights that I'm not rehearsing, I'm hanging out with you, Tom, because the other thing that I'm doing...
Oh, so it's my fault. Okay.
We have extra rehearsal this week because it's Las Vegas Youth Orchestra concert this weekend. So
You're in the Las Vegas Youth Concerts?
The Youth Orchestra. I'm not. My daughter is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, yet another parent on this episode trying to pass things off that their child prevented them from being able to do. But
yes, that's definitely what I'm saying. So anyway, doing that, I've been on several other shows in the meantime. Listeners to your show, they know Kieran, who shows up a whole lot. Dad and I were on his show talking about
the Broadway Melody.
Oh my God, the Broadway Melody. I'm like, it's right there in front of my brain. I'm so sorry, y'all. Let me just say this publicly. I have actually recently been diagnosed with ADHD, so I'm not just an idiot. There's literally problems in my brain.
Really?
Really?
Would never have guessed it. Having lived with somebody for 37 years who is, I know this dilemma.
Yeah.
And 3 different people in your household at any one time that definitely have that.
Well, so being diagnosed this late in life has been sort of a revelation and all of those types of things. And I'm recognizing that there are some really specific things that I need to do in order to keep my stuff together. And Tom actually is helping me with some of that by literally saying, hey, let's start another podcast together. Therefore, you have to hang out with me once a week. And therefore, I get to harass you about editing your other stuff. So if you haven't heard...
It's my public service for William Shea that episodes get more regularly released and that he can continue to do the show now that he is well and fully able.
Yes, this is true.
Spend
this is absolutely true.
quality time, which means you need to move on. You need to continue that cycle. Just keep recording and then editing and releasing, like on a weekly basis.
Like we used to do. I don't know if y'all know this, but Tom is a very good motivational speaker, and he is an excellent friend. So, yeah, I've been doing podcast stuff and watching TV to podcast on.
Okay, Dad,
So-
bring it out here now. Okay.
I've often thought of Simon Sink and Tom Duncan in the same breath.
Well, given that it's Simon Sinek,
Cynic, excuse me.
yeah.
Anyway, no.
One gets paid millions of dollars to do it and is much, much better. And I'm readily willing and able to admit that because he's quite brilliant. And the other of us is okay, but they bring it out in small doses on people that they enjoy spending time with.
Well,
Like
and-
yourself, because I keep you on task.
I do enjoy spending time with you, Tom. But yeah, part of what I'm doing is Tom and I have this other show that we do, and we talk about The West Wing, which is fun. I've been enjoying
Which you
that
can
a whole
catch
lot.
on this feed every
Yeah.
week, usually releasing on Sundays.
Yeah. That's been real fun talking about constitutional law and politics and all of that type of stuff. And things happening in the 90s, not in the 30s or the 70s. Yay!
That is true.
It's the most modern thing I've ever talked about.
Well, especially since we're relating it to modern day politics as well on top
That
of it.
is
but-
correct. Yes, it
Yeah.
is very fun. But I also have to bite my tongue quite a bit so that I don't.
That
Get
is
in
by
trouble.
your choice, but I do try and make sure that everybody knows my opinions are only my own.
Yes. Yes.
But yes, if you want to hear Tom's political rantings, head over to that show.
Right. Or just hear me laugh the whole time as I react to old TV. Yeah, it's good times.
So, Dad, when are you planning to join us for that?
I don't know. I know you've invited me. We'll have to
Dana
talk.
immediately listens to every episode, right? Of course. Just say yes. Just nod and smile. Just nod. Thank you, Dana. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that didn't feel like a hostage video at all. But anyway, where are your socials? Where can they find your shows?
Yeah, so Shea Cinema you can find on all of the podcast streaming platforms except for YouTube because we don't have a video podcast. On social media, it's basically at Shea Cinema on Instagram and Threads. I don't hang out anywhere else in social media world because that's too many things. So yeah.
So we left off at best performance. Dad, who do you have down?
I have Cagney.
I do as well.
I do as well. That's what it has to be. Sorry.
I don't think it's a particularly strong story. I think it's rather hollow, and it's really just one of these where if he wasn't at the center of it, I wonder if this movie is remembered at all.
Probably not.
And that's why I also have him as my most charismatic, because yes, there are some women in these, but they're kind of throwaways for the most part. Like, the story doesn't really revolve around them all that much. So, But yeah, I kind of defaulted to Cagney as the entire reason to see this movie.
I agree, but he's not my most charismatic. Most charismatic would have to be Jean Harlow. Her presence just on screen, even though she doesn't say a whole lot, everybody is looking at her. Yes, of course, Cagney, but that's why he's the best performance, right? Jean Harlow is the most charismatic because whether it's related to Ice Cubes or not,
I was going to say,
gorgeous to look at.
Is it that she's charismatic or her nipples are?
You can't see her nipples in every shot. Definitely it's her, right? And she's playing this very alluring character. She definitely is supposed to get reactions out of people, but that a lot of that is charisma, and it's not just because she's pretty, because you know who also is in this movie who's gorgeous is Joan Blondell, but she's just pretty. She doesn't have that extra charisma in this film. She has it in other films. The extra charisma in this film, I think, for most charismatic.
I had Harlow too, but secondary performance comes first. So,
okay,
I had Donald Cook.
I did as well.
For best secondary, this one I gave it to Wellman, actually, because this is one of the movies that he's most remembered for, and the trouble that he went to get this movie made, kind of behind the scenes and stuff like that, his willingness to do certain things, that whole best special effects or practical effects thing that it won is because they had to use live ammunition on set. James Cagney almost had his head blown off. So in those shootouts, those are real bullets. And when he's standing at the wall and the bullets go right by his head and they go right where his head used to be. So, yep. So I give it to Wellman for best secondary performance.
Shouldn't you give it to the stunt director then?
No, because that's overall. I said it was overall, but one of the things is deciding we're going to do a shootout and we have to use real bullets. And yes, there's other coordinators there, but who's the one who decides all of that? That would be Wellman.
Okay, so backtracking a second here. Dad, you and I had Donald Cook. What was the reason that you thought he was best secondary here?
Well, I just thought his performance actually stood up. It wasn't so over the top and so cheesy that some of the other performances were. He looked more realistic and presented his character more with a level of realism that you can see. His shell shock, if you know, and I use the term because that was what was prevalent in World War I. Demeanor coming home was a little over the top, but for the rest of the performance was pretty solid, so I felt he stood out from everybody else other than Cagney.
And I guess I would add that this is kind of a default thing for me because I think he had the second most interesting part, and frankly the only storyline that was of any substance to me, which is the conflict between one brother who's supposedly the upstanding moral one and the one who wasn't. And it feels like at the end of the film, it's trying to convey that he's kind of turning into Tom a little bit, or at least that he might take his own revenge or seek something out that's above, which kind of feels like a complete sea change from everything else we've had in the movie. Like, he is so adamantly against Tom up until the point that Tom is in the hospital and then gets kidnapped. For that to kind of like flip there at the end of the movie, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to me per se. But then again, I think that's where I would criticize the movie overall, is primarily in its storytelling. As far as the actors go, again, he's the second best written part. And somewhat by default, I'm like, all right, that's the only other plot line or the only other character that I felt was really noticeable, except those that were like easy stock fill-in characters like Putty Nose or Patty Ryan, which are just like, we're going to create Irish gangsters that are overly stereotypical. But anyway. All right, moving to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. I have Putty Nose's setup, which is the early scene where they basically barely get out alive and then Putty Nose disappears. Then I have Gasoline Liquor, which is the first time that they're trying to steal liquor out of, or I guess it's beer, but out of the warehouse and trying to resell it. Then I have the welcome home, which refers to Mike Powers and his return home, and obviously when he gets told what Tom is up to and the conflict that happens there. We have the grapefruit scene, which we talked about in the Did You Know section, and then I have the final shootouts. You could also add probably the final scene where Tom is at the door and then collapses.
Tom's abduction, that whole sequence leading up to that, because that's what I have to add.
I don't know if I would put it as the abduction so much as the final moment, because there's really nothing to me that stands out other than the final moment where Tom looks somewhat mummified and then he falls inside the door.
He's dead already. He's dead on arrival. So
That's
he's
a different movie.
Jinx.
So, I mean, but he's being delivered as a package, right? So he's not mummified. He's Hannibal Lecter is what I always think about once I saw.
I don't know. He was probably delivered by the post office. Anything live that had to be shipped by the post office at this point is likely to be mummified by the time it actually fucking gets there.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, but if a package that side, you're probably using UPS or FedEx.
Well, they just can't find anybody's door.
Well, that's fair. No matter how many signs you put up.
Anyway, I would include the end of the film. So either just that final shot or that whole sequence, whatever it is. I think that needs to be part of the options.
Understood. Any other scenes that either of you would like to nominate?
Not from this movie.
Okay. You want to suggest the King of the World scene from Titanic?
Woo! The Macaulay Culkin Donald Trump scene from Home Alone 2.
Okay. You can nominate that for this. Sure. We'll suspend the rules this one time so that you can recognize Trump in a movie. Okay. So, we have 6 nominees and 1 offshoot. We have Putty Nose Setup, Gasoline Liquor, Welcome Home, Grapefruit, Shootouts, Tom's Death, and the Mango Mussolini does Home Alone 2.
Yeah.
Just laugh. It's okay.
I wouldn't, so now I can't.
What is the best scene?
It's when Warren Beatty uses the hair dryer.
He stuffs the hair dryer down his pants.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Go back and listen to our Shampoo episode or not.
It's one of the best podcasting experiences that exists.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I got it out. Okay.
Does one of you want to pick a best scene here?
I'm going to go with Gasoline Liquor. And it wasn't they were stealing it. That's how they were shipping it. They had to quit and do it so that they didn't get caught. That's how they were shipping the liquor or the beer in this particular case, I think.
Yes.
You know, and I picked it as the best scene because it is the one that most depicts the bizarre nature of Prohibition. I mean, I'm watching this film at the same time I'm reading Last Call for the second time. It's a book by Kent. I'm trying to blank as to his first name. Michael, I think. Michael Orkent. And he did the companion to Ken Burns's documentary on Prohibition. And the fact that there was a small group of people in this country that wanted it, and somehow it became the law. And everybody is just violating it like crazy. I mean, even the uptight Herbert Hoover would leave the Commerce office and stop at the Belgian embassy and have cocktails before he went home at the end of the day. Because, thumb your nose at it. But again, the police were trying to enforce it, and it just, the bizarre nature of it. They've got it stored in this place. They have to get it loaded or get it hauled off. So they use a fake gasoline truck to haul it right through town. I mean, that just to me sums up that whole Prohibition era.
The book that Dana is referencing is The Last Call, The Rise and Fall of Prohibition by Daniel Okrent.
Excuse me, who's also the guy who invented rotisserie, which is now fantasy baseball.
Which also begat all of fantasy sports, so we don't want to just credit him with the one thing, but, the multi-billion-dollar industry and the thing that ruins offices in the fall.
I think it makes them more interesting.
Depends on whom you have to see. But anyway, moving on. I would probably say Welcome Home was the most interesting to me because, again, that's the only plot line that I felt had a significant amount of substance to it, was the difference between Tom and Mike. The fact that you have these two brothers that have wildly different outcomes, and one feels so staunchly against the other's principles and values, but they came out of this same circumstance and environment. And to me, it's supposed to emphasize that Tom really isn't a byproduct of his environment so much as he has taken the path of least resistance. He has used the fact that he's of a particular environment to actively make bad choices, and then falls back on that as a convenient excuse.
I think that's an interesting analysis of him as a character. I also think that this scene is the best scene of the movie because it's essentially the emotional climax of the film, because you do have those two sides coming together and both of them view the other one as completely without morals. The whole statement of "you killed Germans, didn't you?" This is like the number one thing that you do not say to somebody coming home from war. And Tom's belief in that moment that there is actually nothing wrong with what he has been doing, right? He hasn't abandoned his mother. He takes care of her. He still brings her money and things and all of that. Mike going off to war has essentially abandoned the family, and now he's come back and is completely ruined, more or less, because of being shell-shocked. But this is also Mike's character, Mike's position is also going to be the character that most people would relate to, or relate the most closely to, because Tom as the protagonist villain character being a criminal, that's not everybody's a criminal, right? So we might find him interesting to look at, but we're much more likely to have someone like Mike coming home and experiencing the trauma, or sharing the trauma essentially of the Great War. And so their explosion at each other in that scene, I feel essentially it's sort of the microcosm of what's going on in the world at large. The fight against prohibition, all of the criminal activity, the state of affairs across the planet, all of that stuff simmering underneath the depression, all of that type of stuff.
I would agree that Mike is the most likely, even though a lot of movies from this era don't tend to do that, but he's the most likely to be identified as the audience avatar in the film because he has certain sentiments. But I don't think Tom believes himself to be a moral figure. I think he thinks he's a more practical choice because there are no morals. He feels himself to be amoral, and that's why he kind of plays with the whataboutism in that moment, because really Mike is calling him on his bullshit and saying, you're a villain. And he turns it back around because it's like anybody who has been called out, they immediately have to say, well, you're a hypocrite and you're this and that, and they get defensive. So to me, that if Tom felt he was virtuous, he would not have to play that game. He would not have to feel defensive because he was actually upstanding.
Well, okay, so I can concede that point in particular, but I think that he does subscribe to those morals in direct opposition to Mike, because Mike is getting the welcome home. Mom is overjoyed that Mike is home. Tom has been there the entire time and has provided her with all of these things, constantly checks on her. And who does she care about? The guy who's been gone the whole time. And so I think that in that particular instance, this is full-on sibling rivalry, right? And he is particularly mad at his brother and is frustrated at the way that his brother is being lauded when he sees that Tom sees that Tom and Mike are not that different, because yeah, what about it? We've both killed people. We've done awful things, but you get a public parade and all of these types of things, and people want to lock me in jail, right? So,
well, how you kill people within context makes a difference. Any criminal attorney will tell you that.
Sure, but is there a lawyer sitting in that room at dinner? Absolutely not. It is
there
Tom.
Should be. There should always be a lawyer.
Always be a lawyer present. But in that moment,
the moral of last week's movie was always consult a lawyer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Favorite scenes?
Grapefruit.
I also had the welcome home here, but do you just enjoy the comeuppance here, Dad, or is there something else?
I'm not going there. I'm not going to elaborate. Just leave it at that.
Okay. We'll let the audience decide.
So, Tom, you had what here? You had the welcome home as your favorite scene. So this is gonna sound bizarre, but my favorite scenes are the ones that to me are the most uncomfortable, and it is killing Putty Nose and killing the horse. They are just a spotlight on how cruel and detached Tom is. In particular, the killing the horse, right? Getting revenge on the horse, which the horse doesn't know what's going on. And those are the ones that stick out to me as that's what makes this story different than just a regular gangster movie. And as much as I think the welcome home scene affects me more emotionally, killing a horse is so, it sticks in my craw a little bit. So even though it makes me feel bad, that would be my favorite scene because it just throws me completely off kilter.
Okay, and most indelible moment, I have Tom's demise here, but also the final title card. And here's going to be my small rant. Obviously, the shocking effect of Tom falling in through the door, that he's already dead, that they just basically dropped off his body. I mean, everybody kind of knew that was coming because that's, obviously we've watched enough movies to know exactly how that's going to go. Everybody gets excited and then they drop the final nail on you. But the final title card feels like it's overly preachy and off-putting and doesn't feel earned in the slightest, in my opinion. And so it's just like, we've restored this film. I know that's accurate to what they were trying to convey at the time, but you couldn't cut that last 30 seconds.
They had to keep it in.
Okay, sure.
They literally could not release the film without that, so to take that out would be just as egregious as them taking out these other scenes for censorship once they re-released it after the code was enforced.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Other most indelible nominations.
I mean, the grapefruit scene has to be in there. For me, it would be a toss-up between the final shot and the grapefruit.
I had the final shot, which I already said, so.
All right. Man, a few words. But that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 276 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Valerie Lee Shepard, 94, American actress. The Wizard of Oz, Our Gang. John Nolan, 87, English actor. Person of Interest, Terror, Batman Begins, Dunkirk. Arnie Olson, 64, Canadian screenwriter. Cop and One Half, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Sid Croft, 96, American writer, puppeteer, and TV producer, Land of the Lost, and H&R Pufnstuf.
So, I think there's only one of us on this particular program that's going to have a relationship with Land of the Lost and H.R. Pufnstuf.
And the New Zoo Review.
Fair enough. My two big... I guess Valerie Lee Shepard being one of the munchkins from the original Wizard of Oz. Everybody's seen that movie. Everybody kind of has a tangential relationship. Sure. John Nolan is the uncle of Christopher Nolan. He was in a TV show that was a CBS procedural for the Can't Find the Remote crowd that was long running, and at least he was in it. But he kind of showed up in a lot of Chris Nolan's films. So he plays kind of a stock character, board member on Wayne Industries in the Batman movies. And he's just a random bystander in Dunkirk. You know, he showed up and he got a paycheck because he was related to a famous director. Sounds really great.
He's a Nepo baby, you mean?
I mean, what is the relationship there that he could be... It's not Nepo baby, it's Nepo uncle? Anyway, and lastly, Arnie Olson, my relationship to him is a little bit strained because it is one of the two television programs that as a youth that I was banned from watching. Rugrats being the other because apparently it taught bad lessons because I asked my parents if they no longer loved me after a particular episode, and then because my mother was hanging out with the wrong social crowd at the time, she listened. And Mighty Morphin Power Rangers because
Because you were kicking your sisters all the time.
Yes, I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
I was trying to recreate all of the martial arts moves using the most appropriate punching bags that were available to me at the time. So, any other additional comments for relationships with any of these that we're remembering this week?
Can't believe Sid Croft was still alive. I would have thought for sure he'd have been long gone. But 96, he really, yeah.
And so we remember these here fondly for their contributions to the arts with a moment of silence in their honor. And now we move to Best Funniest Lines, for which two of us have prepared. I will start out here with Tom Powers. Hey, Stoop, that's got gears. It ain't no Ford.
Matt Doyle. Gee, she's a honey. I could go for her myself. Tom Powers. What do you mean you could go for yourself? You could go for an 80-year-old chick with rheumatism.
Tom is a boy. Tom grabs his pants just as his father is about to spank him. How do you want it this time, up or down?
Patty Ryan. As far as Patty Ryan's concerned, there are only two kinds of people, right and wrong. I think you're right, and you'll find that I am.
Tom Powers. You're a swell dish. I think I'm going to go for you.
Tom Powers. Hiding behind Mom's skirt like always. Mike Powers. Better than hiding behind a machine gun.
My last one. Tom Powers. Why, that dirty, no-good, yellow-bellied stool. I'm going to give it right to him in the head the first time I see him.
And I'm out.
Sarah, did you have any to add? Thank you.
Insert the grapefruit right now. That would be my quote.
Would you like to go to the fridge, grab one out, demonstrate for us?
Yes. No.
Okay, let's move to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out. So roughly 1936 to today, the last 90 years. What is the impact and significance of this film as shared between two equal yet separate groups, the industry and the audience, 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. You know, I've been saying that now for probably 6 months, and still no one has ever said that or picked that up, that separate but equal groups from Law and Order. Not one person. I was thinking sometimes somebody would pick up on that, but yeah. Anyway, Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
The industry has a little bit of reverence for it. It's not a particularly forgotten film. It's been recognized a couple of times by the AFI. It is obviously in the National Film Registry, and it doesn't feel like there's a huge barrier to entry to get into that. But that being said, I gave it kind of a soft 3 for the industry recognition there, just because it does have a few things that are recognizing of it. I think if you take maybe a film class or a film history class, that this might come up, at least maybe James Cagney in this era of film. This kind of kicks off this era of early gangster films, and I would say is kind of contributory. It's in the same vein as a Little Caesar, also from the same year. But on an audience standpoint and our world-famous office poll, we had one person raise their hand that said they had seen this film, only to find out that they had seen Public Enemies with Johnny Depp. So, yeah. Nobody knew this film, let alone James Cagney or Jean Harlow or William Wellman. Yeah. And I think this is actually a film that the vast majority of cinephiles might not have seen as well. So I'm going to do a rare 1. And I have a 4 here.
Industry. I think this does really start Cagney's career. So I don't have a soft 3. I have a 3.5 for Cagney. And for the public, I was waffling between a 1 and a 1.5. And I guess I'm going to go with your 1 because this is not a highly regarded film, and I mean, this is not something I see a lot of cinephiles like. Did it even get nominated by anybody in the Cinema Legacy poll?
I don't know, and you know the amount of things that I'd have to go through to try and search through that right now while we're recording.
That's fine. I can't believe that it was. If it was, it would be like 1.
It's very possible. There were people that were nominating stuff from the 20s and 30s. It was more throwaways than it was necessarily like the emphasis of a lot of people's lists, but I mean,
usually, like, I did nominate some stuff from the 30s, but I did the Marx Brothers simply because it's so iconic, but still.
Yeah, and I did as well. I nominated A Night at the Opera. But okay. So we have a 4 and a 4.5.
Okay. So for audience, oh man, for legacy, yeah, unfortunately, I think that as much as I know this movie and I like this movie, this is not a movie that most people are familiar with. Now, even among cinephiles, nobody's seeking this out first. They would probably watch it if you recommended it, but yeah, this isn't a must watch that's for most people. So for audience, I'm gonna be super generous and give it a 2. But for industry, for legacy, all of the things that it's been considered for AFI, although that list does need to be redone because it's already 20 years old. But the number of places that it appears on those lists, the way that people within the industry talk about this film, and again, you have to remember, I'm living in this world all the time, right? So I'm constantly consuming that sort of media and things like that. this definitely sets off Cagney's career. It's not the beginning of the gangster movies. It is the beginning of gangster movies once sound has been introduced, but there were lots and lots of gangster movies in the silent era. So in terms of the stereotypes that we have about gangsters in movies, they're all based on Cagney in this film, more than they are based on Edward G. Robinson in Scarface. Therefore, the legacy of this movie, essentially in the industry, we're still recreating Cagney's portrayal. We still reference Cagney's portrayal, even if we don't know what we're referencing. So therefore, for industry, I'm going to have to give it a 4.5. So that's 6.5 total for me.
And that is a straight 5. Somebody ruined the average, but at least it's good math. Moving to impact and significance, this is a measure of the impact and significance of the film in the initial 5 years after it was released, so 1931 to 1936. What is the impact and significance among those same two groups, the industry and the audience? 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Since I went first last time, Dad, would you like to lead here?
Sure. Industry, I have a 3. I think that, again, it started or kind of perpetuated. There were gangster films before and after. It was not that highly regarded at the time it was released. And there were several comments or critics who were commenting about it not being that impactful. It was just another gangster film. But it did do well in the box office. Not great, but it did make money. So I think it's a 3 and a 3, and I'm at a 6 overall because I think it was important, but it wasn't the biggest gangster film or the big film of that time frame.
It's really hard to ever, especially on some of these really early films when we don't have that true box office barometer, to say how much impact something has. I think from the Did You Know section, I'm going to take out a couple of the anecdotes where people had certain iconography from the movie, particularly the grapefruit scene. But I guess Cagney's impression overall, his ability to work, his stardom is directly tied to the film. I don't have anything to add on the industry, but I think as far as the general public, this movie was just slightly more bleeding into the general public iconography, then I think you gave it a little bit of credit. So I had it at a 3 and a 3.5 for a 6.5.
Okay, so for me, for the audience, I'm going to give it a 5. Because guess what? When this movie came out, it was playing 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. Okay? That's kind of unheard of at the time. People loved this film. So while we don't necessarily have actual box office records, I mean, some of them say that it earned about $500,000 domestically, but what does money even mean back then anymore? So that doesn't necessarily tell us as much as it's going 24 hours a day. It's the Depression, okay? Wherewithal, the amount of thought that had to go into, we're going to make this available around the clock and risk spending money that we don't have in order to get people to come in to spend money that they don't have, that's pretty significant. So audience is a 5. Industry, I'm going to give it a 4. The only reason I'm not also giving it a 5 is because critics at the time were questioning it. Maybe it's not so great. Cagney was highly regarded. It did, again, catapult his career, but it was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Story. It was in those circles, and you can always find a negative review for any movie, even the most popular, highly regarded ones at the time. So yeah, it's going to be a 4 for industry for me, so 9 overall.
So that's a 7.17 average between the three of us. Let's move to novelty then. This is a measure of the originality of the film and the execution on said ideas or originality of the film for 5 and 5 points apiece and a total of 10. Let's let our 8-time guest lead us off this category.
Golly gosh. This one is a little, again, this one's painful for me to do because I like this movie, and obviously I've said that I grew up watching it. So I'm of course biased and kind of don't know how to separate that out. However, when we're talking about novelty in terms of originality, this is still a movie that was adapted. So it's an adaptation. It is an adaptation of an unpublished novel, but this is a genre that was incredibly popular at the time. It doesn't necessarily bring anything in that is so over the top and shocking. It needed to be realistic. So it's not telling a story that anybody hadn't heard before. So in terms of originality, I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. In terms of execution, this one I'm giving a 3. There are decisions that were made in terms of the filmmaking that more or less become tropes. Our whole concept, kind of a film noir where things are happening at night and it's always raining. That's going on in this film. Not tons of like trick shots or anything like that, but effective framing and things like that. So yeah, execution is a 3 out of 5 for me, so that's a total of 5.5.
I'm going to default to your originality number because I really don't have a lot of great evidence myself to support this one. I would say that there are some pieces of iconography that I might give a bit more credit to, but 2.5 is fine for me. But I have the execution at a 2.5 as well, so I have a 5 total. The story just is lacking. Like, it might be based on real life, but it feels like because we're traversing through so much time, it's like scenes from a guy's life instead of a truly coherent tale or a narrative that really makes sense. And frankly, the stories that truly stick out or that have some cohesive nature come to the fore early on in this era. It Happened One Nights, your Cimarrones, the classics. So in this one, I have a 5.
All right. I'm going to start with the execution. When you're talking about what's the equivalent of a biopic, not a real life person, it is scenes. That's all it is. I mean, who wants to see the period of time where he ended up in bed with a cold or nothing happened on a particular day? You're going to do scenes. So I don't
You're missing the point
for that.
completely.
You're saying it's disjuncted and it doesn't flow. Okay.
Correct, because there's no central narrative of who the character is.
The snippets tell you who the character is.
No, they don't.
Yes, they actually do. And I disagree, and I'm entitled to disagree with you. Believe it or not. That I think that you could glean who this character is by the events that take place.
Yeah, but then your comments don't make sense. You could disagree with me, but your reason that you stated for disagreeing with me outside of you just think I'm wrong doesn't really make sense. You're making an analogy that...
Because what it is you see little bits and pieces of him in different contexts, and you show the slow evolution of him from being small-time petty crook to major player and trying to become the kingpin. And he fails. And that's what I'm seeing. So I believe it's a 4.5 for execution. Now, for the originality, I mean, when the New York Times critic at the time Andre Senwald is referring to this as just another gangster film at the Strand. Weaker than most in its story, but stronger than most in its acting. I think that sums it up. It's not original. There was a lot of gangster films out at that by that time frame. This was a little better, but I only go with a 2 for novelty. So I'm at a 6.5 overall.
So that's a 5.67 average between the three of us. The second weakest category to this point. Then we move to classicness. This is a category defined primarily by how well something has aged or not. We have many different nuanced takes and little pieces to every piece of the scoring with this. It is our most amorphous and difficult to define category. And so, because of that, we turn to our senior nuance correspondent, Dana.
All right, we start with 6 because it's easier to go down or...
It is easier to go down because something is aged poorly than to go up.
Okay, let's start with the 6. First off, down a point. The stereotype of the gay tailor.
Again, that wasn't in the original theatric trailer. Or, excuse me, the theatrical release. That was one of the scenes that was taken out.
Yeah,
In the re-release.
In the original release.
No, it was in the original release.
It was in the original release, otherwise it wouldn't exist.
It was taken out for the for the re-release.
Because it's pre-code.
Then put back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Treatment of women in general, they were just arm candy for the most part. All right. The only woman in the film that had any real substance and was strong ended up raping the male lead.
No. You're thinking of two different characters.
Patty's
girlfriend is the one that raped them, but she's not the one
Yes.
with the most agency. That's Jean Harlow.
Two
different
I don't
people.
know. I thought she was at least held her own, was an independent. Jean Harlow, I didn't find her to be very independent. I think she was more,
I didn't
took
understand
her-
that character.
yeah. So I gave that a neutral because I didn't know what to tell to do with it. I mean, and then of course, but I will give it 2 points up for timelessness, which is this film, you could put it out and could change it up. And I've seen films about, it's been a while since I saw Scarface with Pacino. It's not that far off. It's updated a bit. So I think there is an element of being classicness or of classicness that I give it a 2 up. So I'm right back at the 6 I started at.
All right, so we're going to diverge on that point. I thought about adding timelessness, but seemingly I do that to every single old film. If you re-release this today as it is, nobody would watch it. There's a reason nobody really cares and nobody seeks it out. It's completely outdated. It's got a lot of stereotypes. It's overacted. It feels stilted. The storytelling's not great. How you didn't give a point off for the amount of times that Cagney slaps a woman in this film, I don't understand, because you do it seemingly for every other fucking film. And I think there is a noted nature of a significant amount of historical context that you and I understand, or at least all of us on this particular program, and a few others that I can think of that regularly listen to this program. Hi, Kieran. But there's so much about Prohibition and the Depression that seems so far away because it's almost 100 years ago now that I wonder if people have an appreciation for exactly what was going on at this time and place anymore. Because it seems like kids today probably think the world started with World War II. And so because of that, I'm going to give it an additional point down. So I'm at a 4.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh.
Just give it your 10 and we can move on.
No, I can't give it a 10, but to me, all of the things that were removed for censorship, that were basically put back in, this essentially becomes almost a documentary period piece at that point. Yes, they are abusing women, but they're criminals, right? We don't have regular characters slapping women. You have a gangster slapping women, right? You have a guy who is breaking the law, abusing women, right? So to me, that's exactly the way that he would be acting. That type of behavior is very well documented at the time. And even if we don't understand the time period, I think it's pretty obvious that it's the bad guy who's doing the bad guy stuff, right? We should be able to tell. The portrayal of the gay guy, that's a thing. And that was taken out for many years not because it was like an offensive stereotype, but because you couldn't show homosexuality because homosexuality was offensive. The mere fact that that character exists at all is because things were pretty more progressive than we want to give the film industry credit for at the time. It's not until the code's enforced that they're like, gay people do not exist. They didn't remove it because that's a bad stereotype. They removed it because they didn't want to see the homosexuality. I have to give it an 8. I can't give it a 10 because I know that ultimately this is going to be a hard sell for people. But I do think that most people, if they were to give it a chance, would probably be fairly engaged with it, because I think it's all right there. You don't have to know a ton of outside information in order to be able to process it and understand it. So yeah, an 8 for me.
So let me agree with all of the points that you basically made is your argument that this movie is completely outdated and our standards today are very different, but let me just make an excuse for it so then I can bump it up. That's your argument? Because the entire point of this category is that stuff has not aged well. None of the stuff that you mentioned aged well. So I don't know how you get to an 8 from that.
Because, well, we're talking about the way he treats women, but he's the bad character mistreating women. That's part of what makes him a bad character. So that's a character flaw, not a movie-making flaw.
That's great when it's applying to him killing Putty Nose or the horse, which ironically were your favorite scenes. But just portraying slapping around women for no good reason, or having a weird rape scene in the middle of this movie.
Okay. There is a good reason. It's to show what an asshole he is. Nobody else is doing it. He's doing it. Do we see other men abuse women the way we watch Tom Powers abuse women?
I don't recall.
You don't recall because you don't see it. So you have the bad guy doing bad guy stuff. Therefore, it's not that it doesn't age well. At the time, we were supposed to know that that was bad. So therefore, watching it now and being offended by it, it's still bad. That's not modern sensibilities. That's like, that was of the time for the character. Any character doing that stuff at any time is bad. Just because it was happening in 1931, he doesn't get a pass. We know he's the bad guy.
It's a 6 average between the three of us. Finally, we get to rewatchability. This is insert your own subjective test here. I will say that I've been trying to be a little bit more objective to the general point of view on this particular category instead of trying to insert my own subjectivity. That being said, I am human, so some of that does creep in. I think the only point up for this movie is that it's just about 90 minutes, so the shortness does help, but it's slow, it's plotting, it's black and white, it's disjointed, it feels its age, it's overacted. I have this at a 3.
I myself am at a 3.5. I might rewatch it, but it's going to be a rare event. So I'll leave it there. I've seen it twice now. I probably don't need to see it again.
Okay, so rewatchability for me, again, I am biased. I've seen this movie so many times. If it is on, I will 100% watch it. I enjoy it every time that I watch it. There are times when I watch it, however, that I also fall asleep, but I've seen it so many times, and there's something lilting about James Cagney's weird little accent that comforts me. So for me, recognizing that I am out on a limb by myself, I'm giving it a 7.5.
That is a 4.67 average between the three of us. So finally, we turn to audience score for this one. For Google users, we had a 75%, and for Rotten Tomato users, we had an 84% for a 7.95. So to repeat the categories, we had a 5 for Legacy, a 7.17 for Impact and Significance, a 5.67 for Novelty, a 6 for Classicness, a 4.67 for Rewatchability, and a 7.95 for audience score, giving us a final total of 36.46, and currently placing it on our list at number 263, between Cool Hand Luke and A Bridge Too Far. Now, that is out of 278 total movies on the list.
You know what other two movies I want you to immediately tell me where they rank, right?
Well, I can help you with one. Mm-hmm. Shampoo is still third from the bottom at 276.
Okay, just checking.
And Shampoo is almost a full 10 points below this movie.
Okay, just checking.
Which other one would you like me to cross-check here? I don't remember doing that film.
So,
nope, I don't know. Shampoo it is. That's great. Thank you so much. So right now, would you rather rewatch Shampoo or Public Enemy?
That's a good question.
I think I might actually want to watch Shampoo right now. Just saying.
I think I might too, but only because I've watched Public Enemy twice in the last couple of days.
yeah.
And so Shampoo would be a little bit more fresh, but
more fun.
Only to see Warren Beatty with his hairdryer.
With his hairdryer, yeah.
Anyway, as usual, if you have any additional commentary for us, good, bad, or otherwise, you can find us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You could contact us at our socials at Gmote Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, Threads, or TikTok. Or you can find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmote Podcast. Let's move to remaining questions on this one. What do you find to be the moral of this story?
Crime pays unless you get caught.
I can't disagree.
Actually, you know what? Despite trying to not glamorize this lifestyle, I think at this point it absolutely does. And Tom's life, except for the end of it, looks pretty great, right? So yeah, it does pay.
He was this close to having enough money to buy a presidential pardon.
He needed to buy it, though, in cryptocurrency. Okay, any other remaining questions for either of you?
Yes, I have a question. Who killed Tom?
I think it was some other rival gang that...
Are you sure?
No, I mean, Patty Ryan's actions are a little weird.
Because... oh, we're saving him because somebody else is going to kill him. We're going to bring him home where he's going to be super safe. He probably would have been fine where he was. So why would you move him? Don't you think it's awfully convenient that Patty Ryan is worried about Tom's safety and therefore kidnaps him and brings him home, and he happens to be double kidnapped and killed by this other rival gang? Are you serious?
I honestly didn't really think that hard about it because I kind of was just waiting for the movie to be over. Because it would have been much better had Tom died in the rain.
Okay, sure.
If the movie ends there and doesn't give you the last 10 minutes, I think it's just fine. It felt like an unnecessary coda to fill out a full 90 minutes.
All right, then. You know why they had to do it, though, is because it's supposed to showcase how utterly reprehensible his life is. So it's not just that he is shot and killed, it's that he survives and then is killed again.
J. Edgar Hoover requested it.
And he probably also wanted the Taylor scene removed too.
Basically, he wanted it back in his office.
Yeah. So any other remaining questions?
Get in there nice and well with that.
You mean get in there nice and deep like? Because that's the line from Dodgeball.
Yeah.
As he rubs his navel. Anyway, so I do have one remaining topic to discuss because I did promise someone.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I did watch The Barretts of Wimpole Street.
Oh, yeah?
Charles Laughton is vile.
Yes.
Frederick Marsh is grossly underrated.
Yes.
I enjoyed it for what it was.
Great.
I gave it a 3.5 star.
Okay.
I think Dad would enjoy it. It probably should be more available than it is.
I agree.
I love Frederick March.
Yeah, I wanted to keep this a little bit short in consideration of Dad's time. Now, the question remains, so I've watched both of the Christmas suggestions from our guest. Now,
Yes.
Did you watch either of the movies in preparation for this that I gave you?
Did.
What was that?
Yes. Yes, I watched both movies, Thomas.
Okay. And now you said that you'd watched Duel before, so I kind of crossed that one out that you didn't need to.
No. Here's the thing. I had forgotten that Duel existed as a movie. Okay.
And for context, this is Steven Spielberg's TV movie Duel from the early
Yes.
70s.
With
That feels,
Dennis Weaver.
yes, that has a lot of overlap with Jaws. It feels like a precursor in many ways. But
Yes.
anyway, go ahead.
So I didn't remember that the movie existed.
Mm-hmm.
Or that it was that's not entirely true. I remembered that it existed because my dad brings it up sometimes as being like a really weird, sort of interesting concept, right? I forgot that I had ever watched it, or I basically forgot what happens in the film. So it was like watching it for the first time again because it had been so long. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It is really similar to Jaws. I liked that you never see this other driver. I like that it feels like this is a demon-possessed truck and inexplicably chasing after this guy. I like the paranoia that the main character feels. The ending is fairly satisfying, although maybe not necessarily fully believable. Yeah, it's a super fun, good time. Really enjoyed it.
Obviously, we appreciate Jaws on this show. It's been our number one on the list for a considerable amount of time. It was unseated for a period of time, but it is back to being our number one. I have no arguments against that. It's a very fun movie. I think it's got some great elements. Duel to me is a slightly different one, and there are reasons to enjoy it differently, and it's having to do with the circumstances or the context around it, as it feels like our main character is mostly isolated to himself, as opposed to kind of the tone change in the second half of Jaws, the first half being much more of the terror enhancement that is there, the second half being much more of kind of an adventure film. So this one never really has it. It doesn't change tones halfway through, and I think it's a shorter movie, if I remember correctly. I think it's 90 minutes as opposed to like the 2 hours that Jaws is, but...
Right, well, because it had to be to be on TV.
Right. And I would just say, if you're a Jaws fan and you haven't seen Duel yet, and you have an opportunity to, I think it's a pretty widely available because it's a Steven Spielberg movie, even if it was done for TV. You should probably try and seek that out. Now, the more interesting one to me, even though I recommended that one specifically because of your personal love of Jaws, is did you get to Your Name?
I absolutely did, yes.
And did you watch it with Keeley, as I asked?
I watched the beginning with her.
Okay.
And then she was actually, this is funny, and this is part of the teenage stuff. She loves horror movies. She was deeply bothered by the body switching and the boy grabbing the breasts of the female body he was inhabiting. So she was like interested, and then that really kind of bothered her. And then I had a hard time. I was like, hey, can we finish watching that? And she kept coming up with excuses until I realized, oh, I think she would like the overall story, but that was a little bit of a bump for her. So I think I'm going to get her. I want her to watch it all the way through, because I think that she will actually really, really like the story arc. So here's my question. How did you come across this movie in the first place?
I would recommend that people go back and listen to our episode on this particular movie.
Oh, you
because, correct.
Okay. I didn't know.
So,
did you tell me that?
I don't know if I did or not, but the person who introduced me to this movie was our guest on that show. And it is a person from my film discussion group that gets together every about 3 weeks. One of the nicest people you'll ever meet, Dennis. He had suggested it for our film group, and I enjoyed it so much because his and my film taste overlaps so much that I invited him on the program and we discussed it. And it's a fairly high-rated episode. I think the movie's still well inside our top maybe 50. It might have just creeped outside of the top 50 now, but it was a well-done episode. I very much enjoyed it. I enjoy the film. I was actually surprised how much Dad enjoyed that film. And so I especially because it's animation at times.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to watch Spirited Away this summer. I have no idea what to think about for that movie with him, because I remember me seeing it too the first time. And I'm wondering if I almost should introduce him to some different Miyazaki first, because that was my first Miyazaki, and it's probably the most challenging to just ramp somebody into, because it's so much about the spirit world and mysticism and all these other things. And so it doesn't have the coherent narrative of like a Howl's Moving Castle that I enjoyed a lot
and
more.
the animation, the creatures are a little bit unsettling.
Sure.
Like, at least I think aesthetically it's a little bit of a harder sell. It's so funny because I just took Keely to see Spirited Away in theaters.
Sure.
Has it been since the new year, or maybe it was like back in the fall? Because we watched that movie a lot, but being able to say, I'm going to take you to the theater and have you watch it, because I watched it in the theater when it first came out. Love that film, but yes, do something a little bit.
Well, and my question is, and this is why I was surprised that Dad liked Your Name as much as he did, is he has been on record saying that he doesn't like a lot of abstract things, a lot of fantasy, science fiction kind of elements to it. So the whole body switching, the ghost kind of element to it, all of that stuff, I was surprised that he enjoyed it as much despite the subject material. I'm very much concerned that, because I didn't really care for Spirited Away, I'll be honest. We'll see how it is on the second watch as we come back to it later. There's other Miyazaki I appreciated more.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think, and this is me just making assumptions, that maybe part of the reason that Your Name was more accessible for you, Dana, is because I think just visually it's not very abstract, but visually it is stunning. Yes. There are so many shots that just are these beautiful landscape shots with this really subtle animation where it feels, the same way that we kind of talked about Barry Lyndon, where you could frame almost any shot in its art. And I feel like that's part of the appeal of Your Name. I was kind of buying into the body switching, and I was like, oh, it's because of the comet and all of these cosmic rays or whatever it is, but she's dead and all of these things, and that kind of messed with my head.
Spoiler.
Oh, whatever. So, but I sincerely enjoyed it. One of the things that I really enjoyed actually was the music. I really, really liked It was much more subtle than I was anticipating. Again, visually stunning, a very, very interesting conceit, this body switching, and I think they dealt with it in actually a pretty upfront way. So when you have a teenage boy suddenly inhabiting a teenage girl's body, yeah, he's gonna grab the boobs, all of that type of stuff. Yeah, so Tom, you're still batting 1,000 at this point with recommendations for me. It was absolutely spot on. I was very curious on how you came about hearing about it just in the first place, let alone liking it.
Yep.
So yeah, I loved it, and I'm sorry it took me so long to watch it.
It's all right. People have opportunities to come to stuff at whatever time. So,
and thank you
Dad,
for watching Wimple Street, by the way.
You're very welcome. But I think I already, based on the way this conversation happened, I think I might have already your next selection for next year. So I'm thinking that far ahead. Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Anyway. All right. I do want to thank our guest, though, for being on with us for her 8th time. She will be back with us again in the summer. I think we record the last week of June, but I don't think it comes out till like July 1st. And that's going to be for a seminal film of the early 90s, as we already alluded to, T2, Judgment Day, which I'm very much looking forward to my father's reactions to yet another science fiction movie. This one, a very famous one, a very beloved one.
Dana,
We'll find out together.
Have you seen it before?
Yes.
Okay.
But,
most of it.
Again, remind the audience what you're working on and where they can find you.
Yeah, so Shea Cinema is a podcast that I do with my father. We are watching and reviewing every film nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. We are doing it in chronological order because we are history nerds and want to do all of the nerdy contextualization. So we'll have some more of those reviews coming out soon. All of the films that we have right now are at the end of 1934. You can catch me weekly with Thomas on First Watch Rewatch, our new TV podcast. And for socials, if you can find me, I am on Instagram and Threads. And that's it.
All right. Dad, final thoughts for the week.
Had a good time with you at the Wisconsin Film Festival this last weekend. Saw Man on the Roof, a Swedish film from 1976 on Friday night. And then Saturday, we went and saw a double feature by a director,
Nicholas Grindy. Because there was a man in the audience who happened to be his nephew, cousin, something to that effect, and had to give a pronunciation lesson for all of us because he was going to say grind. And so. But anyway.
So it was a... first film was Barbara Stanwyck from the early 30s. Second film was Boris Karloff from 1940. Both were from Columbia Films.
Well, what films?
Pictures.
You could check my Letterboxd if you need to find my ratings on those. I don't recall the exact names immediately, but...
Okay, because Barbara Stanwyck, perfect.
Yep, and then the Uzo Diaries, which was a documentary of the Japanese director. And then we saw The Currents on Sunday and My Father's Shadow on Sunday.
Both of which I would highly recommend. One was an entrant to the Toronto International Film Festival. I think that was The Currents. And then the other one, I think My Father's Shadow was a Cannes Film Festival entrant last year. Both well worth watching. You can check out all of my ratings. I don't usually leave a lot for reviews anymore. I mean, there's nothing that really scratches that itch for me as far as like writing about film. It's just, if I have something to say, I'll say it on here. But I think both of those were well worth watching. I enjoyed the time. Now, moving into my small vent or diatribe, we had quite possibly the worst film-going people behind us on Friday night for The Man on the Roof. The woman gave commentary like she was, why am I drawing a blank? Ben Affleck in Armageddon?
Or Joe Gargiola on This Week in Baseball.
Sure. And all of the commentary was really obvious and unnecessary and off-putting. And after about the 38th comment in about an hour and 40-minute film, I finally said, shh. And she still then gave her reactions, but it was less like full comments and more of, oh my gosh. Which I guess I'll accept, but don't do that shit. Like, what possesses you to do that? You came in late to begin with, which you don't do. And then you were loud. You gave commentary throughout the entire film. And then to make matters worse, you unwrapped hard candies in the middle of the theater, in the middle of the end of the second act. And it's not like you did it for a little bit of time. No, it took you like a good 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes to unwrap these candies. And then in the middle of a free screening where it's posted on signs everywhere, do not bring drink, do not bring food into this theater. It is prohibited. You left the wrappers on the ground for somebody else to pick up after you. What in God's green earth possesses you to be so egregious as a moviegoer? Come on, be better than that. All right, rant over. Anything you'd like to add, Dad?
No.
Let's just say I was a little animated after that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week for our 309th episode, we welcome back the 5-time club member and award-winning author V.P. Morris to discuss Gilda from 1946, celebrating its 80th anniversary. Directed by Charles Vidor, written by Marion Parsonet and Ben Hecht, cinematography by Rudolph Mate, music by M.W. Stoloff and Marlon Skiles, editing by Charles Nelson, starring Rita Hayworth, Glenn Ford, George McCready, and Joseph Calleja. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, Threads, or TikTok at the handle @GMOPodcast. Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.